In February 1945, a ship was sailing in the Black Sea carrying members of the British delegation. This ship was heading to Yalta, Crimea. This was the day of the Yalta Conference.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt arrived by flight aboard the Sacred Crow. He was also heading to this conference, along with Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, who arrived by car.
It was near the end of World War II. It was 2 months before the dictator of Germany, Adolf Hitler, committed suicide.
One of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific was happening when tens of thousands of U.S. Marines stormed the Japanese-held island of Iwo Jima.
The Yalta Conference was between the leaders of the UK, US, and Soviet Union. They made important decisions regarding the future progress of the war in the post-war world.
First, let's get into a little background information into the conference. The conference was between U.S. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and Soviet Premier Joseph Stalin.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the 32nd President of the USA, and during his presidency he made many accomplishments such as the New Deal and getting his country through World War II.
Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was the Prime Minister of the UK. He is often recognized for getting his country through the worst of the war.
Joseph Vissarionovich Stalin was the premier and dictator of the Soviet Union. He is known for industrializing the Union and leading his country during World War II. During his dictatorship, he killed more than 20 million people.
Now, into the actual conference. They discussed this during the meeting: the aftermath of the war, the defeat of the Japanese, and how to deal with the defeated and liberated countries of Eastern Europe.
Before this conference, the Allies had already decided that Germany would be divided into occupied zones and administered by US, British, French, and Soviet forces.
The conferencees accepted the principle that the Allies had no duty towards the Germans except to provide minimum subsistence.
Some things that were agreed on were the creation of a world organization, a declaration of liberated Europe, and reparation and the execution of war criminals.
These agreements include the creation of the UN, the start of democratic governments, and destroying fascist governments, and assisting states invaded by the Axis powers, which include Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and imperialist Japan, and more.
But there were also many disagreements and debates, such as the argument between Winston Churchill and Stalin about whether elections in Europe should be free.
Another example is that Roosevelt wanted the Soviets to participate in the UN and to have the Soviets join in the war with Japan. Later, they agreed on Soviet participation in the UN and for Stalin to join the war in Japan 3 months after German surrender.
Next, let's get more into the agreements of the conference.
The most important agreements were a declaration of liberated Europe and the dismemberment of Germany. These proved to be vital in later history.
The conference was based around the end of one of the deadliest wars ever, World War II.
That explains why most of the agreements were so important.
This is Dr. Amy Force. I'm the head of the history program at Metropolitan Community College, and I was asked to explain the importance of the Yalta Conference. What were the consequences of it? How was diplomacy displayed at this conference? Well, let's start with the importance of the conference. Having 3 heads of state, Joseph Stalin with the Soviet Union, Winston Churchill representing Great Britain, and FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, as the President of the United States, joining together in a conference that was actually held in Yalta in the Soviet Union was extraordinary. The diplomacy that was displayed with these 3 men was, to begin with, a very wonderful global feat. Franklin Delano Roosevelt asked for, and he was granted by the other 2, to have the creation of the United Nations. Winston Churchill demanded that the Eastern countries, after World War II was over, would be able to have free elections, which they were for most of the part. Joseph Stalin, wanted to have more influence over Poland, which that is probably the biggest negative from the consequences of this conference, because Poland, unfortunately, is going to be overshadowed by the Soviet Union and will be taken in a big chunk of it. And at the same moment, having the three of them meet, the biggest consequence is going to be that the tension, the beginning of the Cold War, will start shortly afterwards, after Germany and Japan on both fronts are defeated.
Finally, the conference ends on the 11th of February, with each of the leaders pondering the future of their own countries in the end of the war.
They all leave as they came, Winston by ship, Roosevelt by plane, and Stalin by car.
This conference brought a sense of closure to the war, but later, the Potsdam Conference would wrap everything up.
But tensions would later arise between these superpowers because of the agreements, and unbeknownst to them, this conference would set the stage for the Cold War.
The Yalta Conference.